In March, U.S. industrial production plunged almost 5.5% from February. It was the worst performance since 1946. Retail sales fell nearly 9% in the same period. Unemployment has soared to levels not seen since the Great Depression in the 1930s. The coronavirus pandemic has wreaked havoc with the global economy, as nation after nation ordered lockdowns or shelter-in-place instructions to a vast chunk of the world's population. It's a terrible situation, but one that is not without hope. And more importantly, it is a situation that will end at some point in the future. For the manufacturing sector, which represents nearly 12% of U.S. economic output, the collapse in demand is unprecedented in modern times. But within every crisis, there's always a seed of opportunity. And for manufacturers, the opportunity lies with technology. Of course, no technology can create demand out of thin air, but it can help to spot the early signs of renewed demand and give manufacturers the chance to ready themselves and their supply chain partners. You're listening to Ahead of the Curve, the only podcast about Salesforce technology solutions for the manufacturing sector. Ahead of the Curve is produced by Gerent, a leading Salesforce implementation and consultation partner. I'm Chris Henry. Today, a conversation with Adam Alfano, Senior Area Vice President in the manufacturing vertical at Salesforce. We'll be discussing the current situation, the immediate future, and the longer-term outlook for manufacturing. Certainly a crystal ball would be useful about now, but you don't need a crystal ball to realize how important a role technology is playing and will continue to play, and how much it can help manufacturers weather the storm. Here's our interview. Manufacturers right now are in uncharted territory with this pandemic. What kind of position has Salesforce taken on how the future could unfold for them?
I appreciate the question. I think this is an interesting time for this podcast, to say the least. I want to be really careful to not try to play infectious disease expert or economist here. I think that the future is a little uncertain on a number of mediums, both in the short term and medium term. And I think, having talked to a bunch of customers, I think that's a fairly unanimous point. There may be opinions of the duration of the impact of this thing and the recovery. And I think all those opinions and forecasts are probably fair on some level. What I will say is, if you strip out the time at a high level, what we do know is there's a very dramatic short-term economic impact. And then at some timing interval, what we believe will be a very strong recovery in the context of some of the stimulus money hitting globally, some of the easing up on the supply chain impact, and some renewed and trumped up demand from this humanitarian crisis. What we do think for sure is that one thing this will change forever is the perspective on remote work, how folks need to communicate within teams, with customers, and with their supply chain, and the kind of data access demands for manufacturers. And certainly those are areas where we have a strong perspective and a strong stake. So hopefully that's a fair place to start.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that regard, then, it could prove to be a kind of a trend towards working remotely more in the future. But right now, this is a significant challenge for manufacturers.
Look, I think I do have several customers and prospects that I've spoken to who are essential businesses, and boy, do we tip our cap to them for braving the conditions. Certainly, that's not easy right now. But I do think there's certainly a bigger focus on remote work and virtual tools across the landscape of companies I'm talking to than there was before this. I think that's a normal action. And a lot of the customers, quite frankly, in the most basic terms that I have that are deployed and have a fairly stable rollout of Salesforce are really thankful they have cloud technology, because we do have stories of companies who are sending out mobile units and shipping old terminals to people's houses so they can plug into old networks from home and otherwise. And so I think that this has created a situation where every company, but maybe especially manufacturers, need to objectively look at their landscape of tools and figure out how to communicate and execute a little better remotely.
Adam says some areas that could benefit from remote work include customer communications, cross-team communication, field service work, e-commerce, and several other areas which he says present a good opportunity for digitization.
Of course, the functions that require physical labor, not so much. There are some theories out there about the potential to create some better efficiencies with remote tools, even for the manufacturing floor. But I think when I talk about creating remote work and really creating virtual environments, we're talking a little more about the front office, about the customer communication, about service, et cetera. There's some obvious need to be physically present in production.
What can manufacturers do right now to manage business risk?
Yeah, I was on the phone with a number of customers yesterday. We had sort of a roundtable discussion, and look, I think I really have empathy for the situation they're in, because as much uncertainty as there is during the crisis, there's kind of equal amounts of uncertainty coming out of it. Certainly a scenario no one wants to be in is that you underfunded inventory, the recovery happens and you're not able to meet customer demand. However, clearly taking a bet and hedging and holding inventory right now is going to create some short-term cash flow challenges at a time where business levels are down. I've heard all kinds of varying levels of approach and tools to manage, but I think to the best of their ability, getting the most up-to-date picture and assumptions of what the forward-looking demand could look like, and at least have some scenario planning in the markets they serve and against the type of customers they serve, is something that's a requirement to start to figure out what kind of demand planning you can cobble together, and frankly, what kind of inventory investment you need to make at a time where certainly conserving cash is a priority.
Manufacturing cloud is intended, of course, to really more closely align sales forecasts with production. But can it be effective in the current situation when basically we've got zero supply and zero demand for supply?
If you ask about the supply side, I think where it plays a role is informing the supply chain in terms of demand. Where we're seeing use cases and customers looking to jump on something like this quickly is really, to your point, with the operations. And there's a lot of I don't want to sound grim, it's just the reality. There's a lot of manufacturers who aren't totally clear on the forward-looking demand and the timing of recovery and the volumes needed at recovery. And frankly, their customers aren't totally sure either, which is part of the problem. But when it comes to some of the challenges on the supply chain side, if you think about some of the export challenges in China and some of the other things going on, obviously we're not going to play a specific role in helping loosen that up. But I do think Salesforce in general and Manufacturing Cloud can provide a really good landscape for communication, to look at data, to start to catalog what customer demand could look like and play that back to the back office and supply team, so that customers can take some better bets and start to get underneath what's needed a little better. And I think that where it really comes into play is that, as I said, you need agility, because that's changing daily, right? As the perspective changes and the scenario changes. And so we're certainly seeing customers take the opportunity to use Manufacturing Cloud to really build out that perspective, maintain that perspective, and continue to evolve it in terms of what their accounts and customers are likely to need.
Is there any kind of a role that Manufacturing Cloud can play in repairing a broken supply chain?
Again, I think about it a little more on the demand side. So I don't want to try to fit a square peg in a round hole, but I do think there's a lot of challenge in sourcing, but there's also a challenge in just like what are we going to produce and what are we going to hold? And I think that if you have better data around the prospective need at a time where historical data is not going to serve you well at all. Somebody made the great comment to me, like, there's no clarity by looking at the order book right now. It doesn't really tell you anything. Again, I think finding tools to allow for a better understanding of customers' expectations right now can help the supply side plan better and execute better, and hopefully cut down on some costs and get closer to reality to conserve cash, but be well positioned upon recovery.
Through this entire conversation, we've been talking about the importance and the role of technology in this never before seen situation. I mean, companies can't even, they've pulled back all forward guidance. They have no clue what normalized earnings will look like. And so the kind of knee-jerk response is going to be, okay, we've got to pare back, we've got to cash conserve, and therefore we have to dump any and all projects that don't immediately benefit our bottom line or help keep the lights on, such as digital transformation projects. Is it the right approach right now to put all kind of digital transformation projects on hold?
Well, I will say I'm hearing a very wide spectrum of approaches there, right? I mean, look, I think there's a lot of places where cash is constrained and companies have no choice. It's a difficult line to walk in terms of potentially furloughing employees or layoffs, yet still investing in other OpEx, parts of the business. So I completely appreciate all that. I will say, though, there's another side to this where we have a lot of customers coming to us saying, hey, although it may not be the ideal conditions, we've never had more time, literal time. We've never all been in one place for this long to look at something like this and really drive it. So it's not unanimous that these projects are all on hold. I would say that, again, there's a spectrum of folks pressing on because they have the time and they know how critical it is, and folks maybe having no choice but to hit pause, which I totally understand. The potential for maybe some broad-based projects to have a second look because of just how cash intensive they are, but customers looking for some quicker wins to at least start the journey. And I like our positioning there, candidly, because one benefit we have from some other technologies is you can be very incremental with Salesforce. You could do a very broad-based transformation, and we'd certainly love to do that, obviously, and help you through it. But there's also some quick wins and more of an iterative approach and more of a seed and grow approach that you can take with our platform that absolutely works. And so we do see folks coming to us right now, especially new prospects, and look for a few things like, hey, help us a little bit with remote work. Help us with customer and employee communication. Let's at least get a start on that. Help us have a little better access to data so we can report and see things, and maybe help us get a start on cataloging some of the account-based forecasts. And those don't always have to be huge projects, right? So while I totally understand the need to potentially have a hard look at some of the really big projects right now and maybe time them for later in the year, we've actually seen an uptick in the activity of curiosity around, hey, could I find a starting point to at least get some wins off the table while I have this time, all things being equal with CapEx and cash flow and otherwise.
What sorts of things has Salesforce as a company been doing then to make that opportunity palatable from a financial point of view for manufacturers?
There's not really a specific answer for that, but what I will say is we understand the conditions. We want to help. We certainly want to be flexible where we can, and more importantly, if our team can help you and it is an appropriate time to get a start or continue on your journey, we're all going to have to be realistic right now about what that looks like and how it unfolds. And certainly, if you read anything about what our executive team's been saying through all this or the perspective of Salesforce, like, we are here to help, and we're sensitive to the market conditions, and certainly we'll apply any instrumentation we can right now to share the risk and responsibility of what a starting point or a continuation of a project could look like.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a role here that can be played by Salesforce's implementation partners too.
Yeah, no question. And obviously we're on a Gerent podcast here. Gerent's a great partner of ours and one that's helped us a lot with our perspective in manufacturing, along with some of our best rollouts. And I think Gerent's done something really smart that's in line with what I've discussed, which is, I'm sure if you want to continue on a really broad-based implementation with Gerent, they'd be happy to do that virtually. And we know some of those things that are happening, but they've also created some quick starts for manufacturing cloud where in 3 to 5 weeks, or even maybe less in some cases, you can at least get a starting point. And I think that's really important. That's not the type of business I think Gerent would typically be in, right? You'd look for a longer commitment, a bigger project, but a lot of companies are a little resource constrained, a little time constrained, but maybe do need to get a start on their journey. And I think that can really help. And that kind of flexibility is appreciated by us and our prospective customers and installed customers. And I think just being realistic about the market conditions, the type of projects that have a higher likelihood of A, being successful right now, and B, being funded, is a way that you can help. I think the other thing that Gerent does a great job of, and you could probably say the same for other implementation partners we work with, is you have a strong perspective on the industry and what other successful customers are doing without getting too specific. And I think that helps maybe our customers with a lot of uncertainty right now see the forest through the trees and find a viable starting point.
Yeah. And I think that it just emphasizes your point about being able to pivot quickly and look at doing something from an implementation point of view that can at least give you a small step forward towards what hopefully is going to be a brighter future.
Yeah, and in the most sincere terms, I feel this way about the partnership with Gerent and what they're doing, and certainly on our side, we're here to help. This is a tough situation. It's probably served as a bit of a forcing function for manufacturers to have to objectively look at their tools and their virtual tools and their digitization efforts. But it's an unfortunate way to have that happen. And we're talking shop here, right, at a time where there's a lot going on in the world. And more than anything else, we're very sympathetic to the families and companies affected by this, and certainly wish them all well. And to the extent that they think we can help them right now, we'll be here. And again, it's a difficult time, so we're sympathetic to that.
This is a difficult time indeed. We've never seen anything like this before. But it's times like these that can often propel significant breakthroughs in how we work and even how we play. Necessity is the mother of invention, and manufacturing in particular has reinvented itself repeatedly. In fact, we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. We've already seen how much has changed in just the last decade and how quickly. That's going to continue. And technology is the driver, providing opportunities to rebuild and move forward. Gerent is one company that holds that view, and to that end, the company has created special pricing for its Quick Start projects that center on manufacturing cloud, sales and service cloud, as well as add-ons that include partner community, Einstein Analytics, and data migration. Now, a Quick Start project is designed to help you get up and running on Salesforce fast with minimal investment, so you can accelerate your returns. You've been listening to Ahead of the Curve, produced by Gerent in cooperation with Salesforce. Our thanks to Adam Alfano, Salesforce Senior Area Vice President in the manufacturing vertical, for being our guest on this episode. Technical production of Ahead of the Curve is provided by Dave Grine from the Acme Podcasting Company in Toronto. I'm Chris Henry. Stay safe, and thanks for listening.